A message called I Serve Because. I serve because. Many people in this church already serve. They serve not just at the church, but they serve people at home and their work. They're just servants. And maybe you want to think about, why do you serve? There's a lot of reasons why you might serve. For other people, I hope to help you see serving in a new way. I hope that this morning I could share with you a reason for serving that maybe you never thought about or made a connection before. Before I do that, I want to share with you a value we have at Lovejoy. We have 10 values. One of them is this, is service. It's we are spiritual contributors, not spiritual consumers. If you come to this church and you're a member of this church and you're a Christian, we're not just consuming, we're contributing. And the church doesn't exist for us. The church, we are the church, and the church exists for the world. Jesus saves them, we serve them. Jesus saves people, but we are called to serve people. And so this morning, I hope to change the way we think about serving. By the end of my message, I hope you will agree and see this statement like never before. I serve because it's an opportunity. I serve because it's an opportunity. Serving is an opportunity, not an obligation. Serving is an opportunity, not an obligation. Before I keep going, I want to mention, if you use the YouVersion Bible app, you could follow along with my message. The outline's up there on the bulletin. We have some other things going on, but if you still want to follow along with the message on the YouVersion Bible app, go to the YouVersion Bible app, like more events, and you can find our church right there. Serving is not an obligation. Now, if you could be honest this morning, if I could be honest this morning, I'm sure there are times where you were asked to serve or to do something and you didn't feel like, wow, this is great. This is so exciting. You didn't feel like it was exciting or a fun opportunity. It felt like an obligation. If you don't know this about me, I grew up going to this church. My parents took this church over 40 years ago when they were pregnant with me. And so I grew up to this church the whole time. And I have served in almost every single capacity you can in this church. Many times out of obligation because I was the pastor's kid. That was what I was supposed to do. I wanted dinner, I had to serve, kind of thing. And so I served. I remember years ago, I was serving as a host. Back then we called them ushers. Remember we called them ushers? We would ush people in, right? There's a bunch of ushing. And so I was an usher and I hated ushering, right? I was such a grouch, a little punk teenager. I don't know if you ever met a punk teenager, but I was one of them. And we were supposed to wear a coat and a tie. And I'd purposely forget my tie because I was being such a punk. You know what I mean? And I'd get there and they would love me. They were nice to me. And all of a sudden something happened one day. All of a sudden, I began to see it differently. My perspective changed, and I began to love ushering people. I don't know what it was, but I was ushering people to their seats, and I was ushering people in, and I was an usher, and I loved it. I would talk to people. I'd love people. People began to compliment me of how good of a job I was an usher. And everything began to change from obligation to opportunity to enjoyment to fun when I changed my perspective. I have served in nearly every area in this church. I set up chairs, I've set up tables, I've taught Sunday school, I babysat kids, I was a host, I did announcements, I've emceed, I've shoveled, I've salted, I've unclogged toilets. All right, you name it, I've done it. I helped set traps to catch animals running around in the church. You could think of it, I could assure you at some point I have at least tried it a little bit. I've served everywhere I was needed, and I loved being able to serve. And today, I want to read you a story about a couple servants that are going to blow your mind what happened when they chose to serve and follow Jesus. The story is found in John chapter 2, the first 10 verses we're going to read. And it's a story when Jesus goes to a wedding and he turns water into wine. Let's read some of the story. John chapter 2, starting in verse 1, says this. The next day, there was a wedding celebration in the village of Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples were also invited to the celebration. The wine supply ran out during the festivities, so Jesus' mothers told him, they have no more wine. Dear woman, that's not our problem, Jesus replied. My time has not yet come. But his mother told the servants, do whatever he tells you. I want to pause there for a minute and just tell you a little context of the story. Back then, weddings lasted a whole week. Okay, you plan a wedding now, it's one day, it's stressful. Imagine a whole week, and pretty much the whole town was invited. And here's the thing. Two things to understand about the culture in those parties. The first is this: wine was essential for any celebration. In fact, the rabbis had a saying, without wine, there's no joy. So wine is one of the most important things they had at these weddings. And the second thing to understand is this, that hospitality wasn't just a nice thing to do. Hospitality was considered a sacred duty from God. You were supposed to be hospitable. So now, a few days into the party, they ran out of wine and they're not hospitable. I mean, this was a disgrace. This was a big deal. It's like an Italian running out of food at a party. It's like the Lovejoy running out of donuts after church. Right? This is a big deal. People complain. They have problems. Continue the story, verse 6. Standing nearby were 6 stone water jars used for Jewish ceremonial washing. Each could hold 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus told the servants, fill the jars with water. When the jars had been filled, he said, now dip some out and take it to the master of ceremonies. So the servants followed his instructions. Verse 9, when the master of ceremonies tasted the water that was now wine, not knowing where it had come from, though of course the servants knew, he called the bridegroom over. A host always serves the best wine first, he said. Then when everyone has had a lot to drink, he brings out the less expensive wine. But you have kept the best until now. The main verse I want you to see this morning is actually verse 9. If you go to the next slide, it shows you verse 9 again. It says this. When the master of ceremonies tasted the water that was now wine, not knowing where it had come from, though, of course, the servants knew. That is interesting. The MC didn't know where the wine had come from. Some people who probably have been partying all week, they've just been partying at the wedding, they probably didn't even know they ran out of wine yet. They didn't know what's happening. The bride and the groom didn't know what happened. The family, no one knew what happened, right? The only people who knew were Jesus and the servants. They didn't know what happened. They didn't know where it came from, but guess what? Even though no one knew how this happened, they all got to taste it. They got to benefit from it. They got to enjoy it. The wedding kept continuing. But this morning, I want to share with you something that's better than just benefiting from a miracle. I want to show you something that's better than enjoying a miracle. It's actually being part of someone's miracle. And do you know who was able to share in this miracle with Jesus? The servants. Only Jesus and the servants knew where the wine came from. Only the servants got to enjoy and be part of the miracle that Jesus ever did. Jesus' first ever miracle, the servants got to be a part of it. Only those who served got to be a part of the miracle. That's why serving is an opportunity. Because when we serve Jesus, we get to be a part of what Jesus is doing in others' lives. When we serve him, even if no one knows our name, even if we don't get credit for it, even if no one says it from stage, but you serve Jesus and people come to church and they can encounter God. People come to church and their life is changed. People hear the gospel and their sins are forgiven. You are a part of that miracle because you serve, because you give, because you're obeying Jesus. Serving is an opportunity. We get to be a part of miracles that Jesus is doing every week. Let me give you 5 benefits you only get through serving. 5 benefits you only get through serving. The title of my message is I serve because. Benefit number 1, I serve because I get a front row seat. I serve because I get a front row seat. Now let me tell you something about myself. I am a Buffalonian. I've lived here my whole life except for 4 short years. I lived in Rochester, born and raised here. I'm a Buffalo Bills fan. I'm not even thinking about the game. I'm not stressing me out. I don't need that. I don't need that. And but I loved University of Buffalo. Went to school at UB, played football at UB, loved basketball. I love going to the basketball games at UB. UB just had a great win, I think last night or Friday, a great win. It was great for the team. I love going to the games. And so I'd go to the games. And sometimes I'd sit kind of wherever I get a ticket just to go. I'd sit in the nosebleeds, I don't fit in the seats. I don't know if you ever thought of that. I just don't fit. Okay, so I'm uncomfortable. You can't really see, but you have fun. It's fun going to the games. And then one day, my friend, he has courtside seats. He's like, you want to sit courtside with me? Now, I don't know if you understand why they call it courtside. It's courtside because you're sitting on the court. Okay, so I go from the nosebleeds to the court side. I'm sitting on the court, all right? The players walk right by you. You could talk trash. You could talk trash to the refs and they hear you. That you're so close that one time they took the ball out in front of us and the players high-fiving the kid sitting next to me. They're so fast. You could feel the wind as they run by you. If you're lucky, they may fall on you or you may get sweat on you. I mean, it was awesome. The players looked bigger. They looked faster. The game was more exciting. It was way more fun. I had more leg room. It was all you could eat food. It was awesome. It was a totally different experience. What's my point? My point is this, that when I sat up close to the game, it was way better than sitting in the nosebleeds. It was more exciting. It was more fun. It was a better experience. It looked differently. It was totally different experience than sitting up in the nosebleeds. And it's the same thing that happens when you begin to serve at church. When you begin to serve God, you begin to get a front row seat because the truth is some things just aren't that impressive from far away. Some things just aren't the same when you're watching at a distance. If some of you can't figure out why people are so excited to get here, if some of you can't figure out why people are here early and they just love being here and they never miss a week, it's probably because they're having a different point of view from you. They probably have a front row seat and they see what God is doing and they're a part of what God is doing and their whole experience on a Sunday morning is totally different than yours. Because when we serve, we get a front row seat. There are some things you can only experience sitting in the front row. And there are some things you can only experience when you begin to serve. I serve because I get a front row seat. Serving is not an obligation, it's an opportunity. Number two, I serve because I discover my purpose. I serve because I discover my purpose. When I gave my life to Jesus in college, I didn't become a pastor or a preacher right away. But let me tell you what I did do right away. I started serving wherever I was needed right away. I fed the homeless once a month. I went out evangelizing on the streets. I went on mission trips. Anywhere I could serve, I served. I set up chairs and tables. I cleaned the church. If it needed to be shoveled, I shoveled. I was the first one out there. I eventually became a missionary in a college ministry. And at that ministry, I served wherever they wanted me to serve. Nothing was beneath me. I was just loving being there. We moved to Rochester for a short time, and I joined a church there. When I was at that church, I served wherever they wanted me to serve. I did whatever they wanted me to do. And what happened in that process is that I began to discover my purpose. I began to understand how God made me and what I was called to do. It was during serving at church and in different ministries that I discovered who I am and that I'm not just called to preach the gospel, but I'm called to preach and lead a church to reach more people to Jesus. And your purpose in life might not be to work in the nursery once a month. Your purpose in life might not be to serve in the cafe or to be a helper in Forever Kids. But it's usually when we begin to serve, it's usually when we begin to obey Jesus that we begin to discover our purpose and who God created us to be. I serve because it's an opportunity. It's not an obligation. Number three, I serve because I get planted. I serve because I get planted. I love this Psalm 92. It says this, the righteous will flourish like a palm tree. They will grow like a cedar of Lebanon. Planted in the house of the Lord, they will flourish in the courts of our God. They will still bear fruit in old age. They will stay fresh and green. When you get planted, you grow deeper. When you grow deeper, you eventually bloom. And when you serve, you get planted and you flourish. You bear fruit. Even when you're old, you stay fresh and lively because you're serving and you're planted in the house of the Lord. You might say, you know what? I don't feel like I'm growing at this church though. I don't feel like I grow here. Sunday mornings just aren't doing it for me. Well, let me tell you why. Because Sunday mornings aren't for you. What's our service? We are spiritual contributors, not consumers. The church doesn't exist for us. We exist for the world. And if you feel like you're not growing, it's time for you to start serving. You got to get planted, grow deeper roots, and you're going to begin to bloom, and you're going to begin to shine, and you're going to begin to become a great person. If you stopped growing, start serving. Don't go from church to church. If this isn't your church, then find your church and serve there. But it's always going to happen if you don't start serving. Number 4, I serve because I build healthy relationships. I serve because I build healthy relationships. I don't know if you've ever think about things like this in the Bible. But think about years later, Jesus ascends into heaven, the gospel's being preached, the church is growing. And I wonder if people began to argue. Like, they didn't have phones, you couldn't take photos or videos of these miracles. And I wonder if people argue, like, is Jesus really the Son of God? Did Jesus really do these miracles? And you ever think like these servants, the guys we don't know their names, we know nothing about, all we know is they served. You ever think they got together and they're like, yo, you gotta hear this story. You gotta hear. We were at this wedding one time, and this crazy dude, Jesus, told us to take ceremonial washing tubs and fill them with water and serve them to people as wine, and it turned into wine. And I wonder if these guys would ever tell stories of this amazing time they served and how many lives it was affected. And I got to tell you something, some of the greatest relationships I have come because I served with other people. And you know what happens when you go through a difficult time in life and you don't have any close friends who are godly to stand with you? You fall. You stop going to church. You turn away from God. Yet when we have healthy relationships, and a loved one dies, sickness hits, you go bankrupt, your kid goes over the deep end, we can stand strong and not only survive, but thrive. See, I need strong Christian friends. So when I'm ready to quit, they could pick me up, they could hold me up, and they could encourage me. And you might say, well, Jonathan, that's all good and dandy for you, but I don't know anyone at church. No one talks to me at church. I don't have any friends here. Well, as your pastor, as someone who cares deeply about your spiritual health, could it be that you aren't serving? Could it be you're still on the sidelines? You're still sitting in the nosebleeds? Maybe it's time to get a front row seat. Maybe it's time to get off the bench and start serving, because it's when you serve, you build relationships, you meet people, you build healthy relationships that are going to encourage you and help you. I serve because it's an opportunity. There's a great opportunity, not an obligation. Number 5, I serve because I am the person impacted the most. I serve because I am the person impacted the most. You might think you're helping others, but the truth is God is helping you. It gives you purpose, gives you confidence, gives you joy. I promise you start serving, you get planted, it will impact you more than you could imagine. Those servants who listened to Jesus told them, go fill 6 stone water jars used for ceremonial washing. They filled them up and they dragged them to the master of ceremonies to drink. Now, if I were one of those servants, I would have been like, whoa, you want us to do what? You want us to fill ceremonial washing jars that, people these nasty, filthy bathtubs, and bring it to the head of the party, and he's gonna think it's wine? Like, nah, that ain't gonna work. All right, we're gonna lose our jobs. We're gonna be made fun of. This is crazy. We can't do this. So why did they do it? They did it because they were obeying Jesus. They were just obeying Jesus. They were doing what Jesus told them to do. And some of us need to get past all the negative thoughts, all the reasons why we can't serve, all the reasons why it won't work out, and we just need to start listening to Jesus. I get it, you have kids. I get it, you're busy. I get it, you're nervous. It might be awkward. There's complications. But at some point, we need to put the excuses behind us, and we just need to obey Jesus. We just need to listen to Jesus. You know why? Because we don't have to. We get to be a part of the miracle that Jesus is doing in others' lives. See, I don't want to just experience my own miracle. I want to be a part of other miracles that Jesus is doing in people's lives. Serving isn't an obligation, it's an opportunity. I want to read you the last verse of the story. I purposely didn't read it because I wanted to save it for the end. The last verse is verse 11. It says this: "This miraculous sign at Cana in Galilee was the first time Jesus revealed his glory." And hear this, "and his disciples believed in him." And his disciples believed in him. Those servants, those people who we barely are mentioned in the story, were not just there for Jesus' first miracle, they played a role in it. And because of it, the disciples believed in Jesus. How cool is that? They helped the disciples believe in Jesus. And because some people serve, because of some servants, we don't know their name, we don't know anything about them, we accept that they obey Jesus, they help the disciples believe in Jesus. And let me tell you something. Because some of you are willing to serve, others will believe in Jesus because of you. Others will believe in Jesus. When you're in the nursery, serving in Forever Kids, and you don't get to see their parents, but the parents are out here in worship and they're weeping and God is speaking to them. Even though you didn't get to experience, you were a part of that miracle. When you're serving in Forever Kids and all you do see is a bunch of kids goofing around during worship, making jokes during Pastor Claire's message, and you don't get to see what happens when they go to school and they don't know any better. They're just telling their classmates about church. They're just telling their classmates about Jesus. They're praying prayers that are audacious and changing lives. You're a part of those miracles. When you come to church and you open the door for someone and you're just kind to somebody, you don't get to hear their backstory. You don't know how rough of a day they had, how rejected they feel, how unloved they feel. But as God begins to touch their lives and changes their lives and brings healing in their lives, guess what? You are a part of that miracle. When you begin to serve at church and you work on the tech team and you help us stream our services, we don't know who's watching online, but when my wife's shopping at the store and people stop her and they're like, "Who are you? Why do I recognize you?" And they realize they started watching church online. And all of a sudden people are watching church online and they're hearing about Jesus. You're a part of that miracle. And when someone in our church has been praying for a family member to come to church, and they start coming to church, and God begins to heal them, and you're serving. You're a part of those miracles. Serving is an opportunity because we get to be a part of the miracles that Jesus is doing in all these people's lives. I could go on and on about serving and all the amazing people. In fact, as I was speaking this message, I just see all these people who serve, and I wanted to stop and just tell stories about these people. I just see serving and the lives they're impacting constantly. I go on and on. And the truth is we need more volunteers. I think in the future, we're gonna have to eventually go to 2 services at some point, and would love to get more volunteers. But one of the biggest needs is in Forever Kids. And we want more people to start serving in Forever Kids. Pastor Claire has a plan to help change and get more people involved in Forever Kids. So I want Pastor Claire to come up, and she's gonna share she's gonna share for a minute or two of some ways you could volunteer in Forever Kids. But I just wanna encourage you, man, these are opportunities to change kids' lives, to change our county's lives and our neighborhood's lives, and to do some great things. So I'll just welcome Pastor Claire. She shares for us a few minutes.
Wow. Where can I sign up? When you think about the community around us, and it just pulls on my heartstrings how blessed I am that I got to grow up in church and just hear about Jesus every single week from my kid's pastor when I was a little girl. And I know some of you have that same story where you grew up in the church and you have that privilege of knowing Jesus from the beginning. And some of you, maybe your story, it just happened like a year ago, and that was where you and Jesus became best friends. What's so cool though is in Forever Kids, every week we get to be the ones to introduce introduce kids to Jesus for the first time and be a part of that miracle of being the first ones to really tell these Bible stories and tell the miracles that Jesus had done for people before them, and then even for the kids that come into the room. And throughout Buffalo, there's just so many people who still don't go to church, you know? They still don't know about Jesus, and they're still hungry, and they might not even know that they're hungry for the meal of Jesus. They're just still searching. And here we've got that privilege to just dine at the table and just grow and be fed spiritually week in and week out, right? But what happens when all these people from Western New York start coming to the doors of the church, ready to go to church and receive from the Lord, but we're not ready for them ourselves? You see, this morning, I believe God is calling us as children of God, men of God, women of God, to prepare the way for Him to move mightily in this house. He's longing to bring people from the highways and byways in the neighborhoods near and far from this house and bring them into this place. And God wants to use you to be ready for them, to be ready to tell hundreds of children about Jesus. It was only 4 years ago that the dream became a reality to build a children's auditorium right here at Lovejoy Church. And that auditorium is back there. And for the last 4 years, we've had amazing teenagers and young adults pouring into these little kids with theatrical shows and dynamic worship, literally leading them into the presence of God. Young teenagers doing this. It's been incredible. And it's become contagious. Our team became so big from reaching more and more children with the love of Jesus that we actually had to start like cutting our team into different sections and create seasons where different people would rotate. And it's just been crazy, the growth of leaders that have happened. Because serving became their purpose. It became these students' favorite thing that they did. They would go to school and they would talk about it to all their friends, and it was just like the highlight of their lives. And in this next season coming up, as we're preparing for the growth that we believe God is going to bring to Lovejoy, we decided that we're going to give our student leaders who are in middle school and high school a couple months where they can just start coming back to church in here and start growing like you guys have been growing for like so long. And we're going to give our students some time to just go deep and worship like you guys do and just grow in their faith. And in this season, we believe that we are going to need to start bringing in more adult leaders and maybe college-age leaders, people who have a different spiritual maturity that can help take our little kids to the next level in their faith. And maybe the things I'm sharing with you today, God is just like tugging on your heartstrings like, wow, I think I could be used by that. Now, don't be afraid of being a cheesy mom or dad or an old granny that's back there leading these kids. It doesn't matter the age. Some of these children don't have grandparents. Some of these kids are missing a mom. You could be that spiritual mom or that spiritual grandpa that they need in their life to raise them up and tell them that God is with them and He loves them and He has a special plan for your life. There's so many things that we can do to reach these kids, but God is going to bring people to our church and we need to be ready for it. And maybe you think, well, I don't know what to say to kids. I'm not a kids person whatsoever. Well, you know what? It's okay. Did you know that in Forever Kids, we have a YouTube live stream where we film our church services just like you do in here, and week after week, we broadcast them so that when kids are sick and they can't make it, or they want to share it with their friends, they have the link and they can watch live on YouTube in the moment. It's airing right now, check it out. And but we have like video tech and stuff like that. So just like you guys have camera operators in here, we need camera operators back there. We could take our live stream to the next level. Another cool thing is worship. Now, some of you might say, oh, I'm not a singer. I can't do that. Well, you could clap. You could lead these kids in motions and movements and jumping and get them excited to enter the presence of God. Maybe you play an instrument and you'd never dream of being up on this stage here, but you could see yourself back there getting your feet wet, trying that out for a minute. You know what? Even just holding a guitar in your hand, those kids will focus in a new way that they never have before and want to go for more of Jesus. There's so many things. And I look back over the years and the things that have happened back there, and we have a blast. It's tons of fun and games and screaming and shouting. It's crazy. But there's moments where one year we had a 6-year-old boy, and he had an awesome time at our Friday worship night. And the presence of God just fell in such a different way. Kids were in tears at the altar, just worshiping their hearts out. And so as parents came to pick up their kids, I felt bad because this one boy, his face was all red. He was crying. And I thought, oh no, did he get punched? What happened here? And so his mom said, honey, what happened? Are you okay? And he wipes tears from his eyes and he's like, I was just praising too much. There was another year where this little boy, he was about 8 years old, and he was worshiping God. And I was challenging the kids, guys, God loves you and his presence is real. And sometimes you can show up at church and you don't even know he's there. But other times, if you just focus a little bit harder, you'll begin to feel him. Well, by the end of worship, this little boy came up to me so excited. He goes, Miss Claire, guess what? I said, what? He said, I felt God give me a big hug, and my whole body started tingling, and I started crying happy tears, and I just felt Jesus for the first time. And it was this most beautiful expression of him just coming to the realization that God was real. And that's a moment you guys can share just as much as I can. We want to help you find your place. So on the back of the bulletin today, there's so many different areas of places that you can get involved. Everything from, and specifically for Ever Kids, I don't even know if you knew this, we created a special needs room. We have a whole bunch of kids that are just needing that extra one-on-one attention, and we call it Forever Special. Maybe you have a heart for children in that situation, and you would like to serve once a month. All of our littlest classrooms, they could always use some extra help. But our theater team, we love doing animated shows. And like I said, our worship team, our dance team, set design, all sorts of things. You guys, we could even have a prayer team back there, just like you guys get a prayer team in here. Imagine kids getting to have prayer after the service. Sometimes we forget. Kids go through real problems just like we do too. But before we go today, I want to invite all of you to stand up on your feet and maybe just hold this card in your hand. It's the back of the bulletin. As you're standing, glance over it. And maybe you heard this message today and you felt like God was moving you to do something different this year and start serving in a new way. Well, as we're all here today, you guys, this is a moment where you can jump in and say, yes, Lord, I want to be a part of the miracle. I want to get involved. I want to do whatever it is you want me to do. I want to be on your mission, Jesus. So as you're holding these cards, let's just all hold them up real high in the sky. This is what we do in Forever Kids. Because this is not just something that's going to go in one ear and out the other, and you're going to go back to your normal life and say, go Bills, and woohoo, and cheer on the rest of your day. You have a mission to accomplish because all of you are children of God. And so whether it's a Forever Kids mission or a cafe mission or a greeter mission or a youth group mission or whatever it might look like for you, it's time to say yes to Jesus. So with our hands held high, I'd like to ask each of you to say, Dear Jesus, what do you want me to do? I am ready. I am willing. I am able. Call me forth to more things. Help me to love. Help me to serve. And help me to lead thousands of people in Western New York into your presence today. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.